Robservations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I'm, of course, Robcasting at you, imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. The mailman came by right before I went on this show and brought me something I can't even believe it exists. But you know, when it came up for pre-order, I had to have it. Like, I don't really know why here's the funny thing about being a fan. So if you're a collector, like if you just collect stuff, whether it's action figures, model kits, die-cast robots, comics, video games, whatever it is you collect, if you've got that mentality, and I'm not saying it's a good mentality, in fact, it's probably the opposite of that, but I'll tell you, I have it. Like, I'll see something that I'm like, oh my God, I have to have this. Sometimes I don't even know why. And sometimes it pushes a nostalgia button, and I'm like, oh man, I gotta have that. Like, I don't think about it. It's like this Pavlovian response, like, Well, Scream Factory, Shout Factory, they obviously put out the 1980 New World picture. Roger Corman produced, James Cameron visual effects, Jimmy Murakami directed, John Sayles written, James Horner scored. Battle Beyond the Stars, starring Richard Thomas as Shad, John Saxon as Sador of the Malmori. I mean, as far as Star Wars knockoffs or Magnificent Seven or Seven Samurai knockoffs in space go, I love Battle Beyond the Stars. I think I saw it in the theater like 6 times. This movie came out, of course, 41 years ago. So Shout Factory announces they're going to release a special edition of Battle Beyond the Stars in a steelbook. But that's not what made me have that kind of a response. No. They decided to include a special edition NECA, not my favorite toy company, but I do like what they make. I just wish it was, well, better constructed. I don't buy a lot of NECA stuff, even though a lot of it's really cool and I want it. But I try and, limit myself to 6 scale. But sometimes something comes out and I'm like, oh my God, I have to have that. I know, now I've given it too much of a preamble, and most of you are going to be really disappointed by what I show. But I can't, it's one of those things where I can't believe this exists. And that is, of course, Saint Exman of the Valkyrie, played by Sybil Danning. I now have a 12th scale Battle Beyond the Stars action figure of Sybil Danning and her boobs. I didn't get it for International Boob Day. I know it's reflecting. I'm sorry about that. But I just can't believe it. I mean, it took somebody 41 years to make a Battle Beyond the Stars action figure. And, of course, the first thing I see is, look at this. It's a really good figure. Little cloth outfit there. Saint Exman of the Valkyrie, believed to live fast, fight free, and have a beautiful ending. And she does. But I just like the fact that somebody made a Battle Beyond the Stars action figure of Saint Exman of the Valkyrie. But now I want to have Robert Vaughn, George Papard as Cowboy, Nestor. I mean, I want all the characters from Battle Beyond the Stars. Now, why is NECA only making this one? Why only Saint Exman? I mean, I understand why. Come on, we're guys. A scantily clad woman with big boobs, even if she is 12 scale. A lot of people, it's what floats their boat. Certainly floated my boat. I just can't believe they have Battle Beyond the Stars action figures. I just now want all of the main characters and Sador of the Malmori. Anyway, with that out of the way, I just thought I'd share my enthusiasm. It didn't come yesterday, so I couldn't show it on What Toys. Maybe I'll show it next week. Maybe I'm going to open this shit up. Because, I don't know. See, I look at this. I don't know. When I get something like this, I don't need to display it. Part of the fun of having this is having it be in the box, to be honest. Like the box, people would look at this and go, what is that? I kind of like the fact that it's in this box. Now, I also have to give a massive shout out, not just because, of course, Scream Factory put out The Hills Run Red last year on Blu-ray, a movie I produced and allowed Dave Parker and I to make there's 6.5 hours of new special features. I would like to give a special shout out. I don't know who was responsible for this, but this was really well packed. It was wrapped in paper, came in a sturdy box. I want to thank you. I mean, this shit's as close to mint as you're going to get. And, it's probably just going to wind up. Yeah, it'll just sit on, it'll when the Robservatory, things move around in the Robservatory, which is going to probably happen this weekend. Finally, I keep saying it, but I got my new cameras, I got my new lights, I got everything I need. I'm going to move stuff around. But, this is, you know what? I was right. It is Scream Factory. Look at that. It's not Shout Factory. It's Scream Factory. So, kudos all around. Thank you all. So, as all of you know, we're less than a month away from the gala red carpet premiere of Tango Shalom here in Los Angeles. And by the way, I will be giving tickets, assuming COVID doesn't thwart those plans. I will be giving some pairs of tickets away, like a radio station giveaway, to the red carpet. It looks like it's going to be way more star-studded than I would have thought. It might be stars that were, big when your parents were young, but still, it's going to be a great star-studded event at the Landmark at the West Side Pavilion, and I'll have more about that later. But I've been thinking a lot about, since I'm now in the midst of delivering a movie, like one of the things I was explaining today is, yes, you can watch, if you had the link, you could watch Tango Shalom online. It's been at film festivals and things like that. But just because you've been able to watch Tango Shalom doesn't mean it's able to be put in theaters. A lot has to transpire before it can be done that way, and that's what I've been doing. All kinds of work on the film. So I even was changing the credits even mere hours ago. But it really got me thinking. I got a phone call about my actual deal. Yes, I have a deal memo in Tango Shalom. I actually own a bit of it because that's what you get when you're a producer. You don't get what you deserve. Say it with me now. What do you get? You get what you negotiate. And look, maybe I'll never make a dime, but you never know. What if it became a big hit like My Big Fat Greek Wedding? I don't know that it would, but if it did, you'd really be happy to have those deal points in place. Now, here's the thing. In Hollywood, there's an adage that you're only as good as your last project or your last movie, which is true. This is the first film that I've produced since 2009's Hills Run Red, so it's been 12 years since I produced a film. I mean, I've edited other films, but, I feel like, every 10 years or something, every decade I'll get to produce a movie. But, hopefully that this film, people will like it. It'll do well, and at least it will open doors. At least I can get myself into a room and say, hey, not only did I produce this film, carry it over the finish line, I edited the film, I was the VFX supervisor, the post supervisor. Every new project that you have buys you or gets you credibility. Now, the difference that I have, as far as things go, is that I actually make these things. Like, yeah, I can make the deal, I can develop scripts, I can do all that, but I actually sit down and Tango Shalom came right out of this computer. Even today, it's still going out of this computer. So if you ask me, Rob, could you produce a movie soup to nuts? I could say, yes, I could produce a movie soup to nuts. And a lot of people that have these big deals can't say that. Like, I can cut a film. Even when I worked in television that I was directing, I was able to edit. They let me edit my own episodes, which is unique. So I have sort of a unique skill set. Maybe that only makes me a journeyman, but, whatever. So let's just say, in terms of this particular movie, I'm very valuable to the process. Basically, I mean, hey, I was helping design the invitations yesterday because somebody had to do it. So, unfortunately, when you're a jack of all trades, people want to, and I would say I've mastered a lot of the trades that I'm a jack of. But the thing is, it all comes down to your deal. And like in the case of Tango Shalom, I will never get rich. I mean, unless it made $100 million, which it's not going to make, because why should it? But you still get what you negotiate, and that's important. And I'll tell you something else. Not only here's a cautionary tale for you, a Hollywood tale. So, as many of you know, I was a producer on the 2 Agent Cody Banks movies. And if you watch the end, the main titles of Agent Cody Banks, like as with like the Marvel movies, they come at the end. The main titles come at the end. I think there's 13 producers on Agent Cody Banks. Now, when you're producing a movie, what you do is you're positioning and the way your title, I know it seems crazy, but the way your title appears on screen is a big deal. Now, what I did was there's a lot of I could do a whole series of things about I'd call it the unmaking of Cody Banks, but there was a lot of legal wrangling, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone. But hey, we got the movie made. We got 2 movies made, one in 2003 and 4. So in the movie, Madonna was one of my fellow producers, and so was Seinfeld's Jason Alexander on Agent Cody Banks. I know, right? Well, if you look at the end credits, what you really want as a producer, if you're a producer of a movie and you're in the main titles, what you want, the great thing to have, this is true of anybody in the main titles, if you're a star or whatever, is what you want is what's called a single card credited producer, which means your name is the only name to appear on screen together. So you're not sharing anyone, like executive producers, and then there's 3 names. So while all this battling was happening, making Cody Banks, there's an opportunity when your agent or your lawyer is fighting for your deal points. And there are things that you fight for. And while everybody was arguing, there's something called paid ads, which means that whenever you see like a movie poster or the back of the video box that has what's called the billing block, it has all the names of the credits of people, that's a deal point. So if you want your name on a movie poster, that's called being part of paid ads. So one of the things that I did when I was negotiating my Agent Cody Banks credit as a producer. Now, full disclosure, I was the co-producer. I was not an executive producer or a full producer. I was the co-producer, but I was the only co-producer. So when I told my lawyer, who was negotiating at the time, he was going to ask for paid ads and all this, and there was all this infighting going on. I said, no. I don't care about my name on the movie poster. What matters is where my name's positioned on the actual film, because that's what people will see. So I said, why don't you do this? While everyone's fighting, hang back, give up paid ads. Don't argue for that. Just say, I just want my co-producer credit, a single card co-producer credit. Well, I won that fight. And if you watch Cody Banks, Madonna shares a credit. Jason Alexander shares a credit. But when you watch the end titles, my name, it says co-producer Robert Meyer Burnett on screen. And it's glorious. No one else, none of the producers, none of the executive producers, they didn't have single card credits. Only I did. So why did I fight for that? Well, Agent Cody Banks is an MGM film, right? What that did for me was it set precedent. What does that mean? It means, well, I will never have to share a credit block with, or I don't have to have my name on screen unless I want it there. I don't have to have my name on screen with anyone else, because MGM, not only did they give it to me on the first Cody Banks, but they gave it to me on the second Cody Banks, Destination London. I'm sorry, I can't recommend that film. I'm not responsible for that movie. But my name's on it. I got a single card credit. So 2 studio movies, my name is on it as a single card credit. So cut to 2008, when Dave Parker and I had developed The Hills Run Red with Dave Scow after Carl Morano and John Carcietta had brought it to us from Fever Dreams. So the time comes to negotiate credits. And this was with a studio. It was with Warner Brothers. And Dark Castle, Joel Silver, Die Hard, Joel Silver, Predator, Joel Silver, Matrix, Joel Silver. He's our executive producer. So as we're making time, or we're negotiating, my lawyer says to the studio, well, Rob Burnett I was a full producer on Hills Run Red. It was my project. I brought it into the studio along with Dave Parker. So my ask in the negotiations with the studio is I get a single card producer credit. It says producer, me, because I had set precedent. Now, that can also mean you get more money, depending on what your deal is. But setting that kind of precedent and making sure that you have that kind of security is very important, because as you move on, if you intend to keep producing projects, that precedent, you don't have to negotiate anymore. You're like, nope, these 2 MGM movies, now I have 2 MGM movies and a Warner Brothers movie. So when I was brought on board on Tango Shalom, and they're like, you've got to produce this movie with us, because I came on after the film was shot, but they didn't have anybody to deal with any of post, any editorial. And I said, look, I'm going to come on and work on this movie, but you've got to make me a producer on it, because I'm going to be doing way more than just editing the film. I'm going to carry this movie across the finish line. And everyone's like, okay. And they wanted to make me a producer. And I said, okay. But here's the thing. You have to give me a single card. Now, at the time, my fellow producer is Joel Zwick, the director of My Big Fat Greek Wedding. So on Tango Shalom, Joel Zwick and I are both single card credited producers on the film. The other producers share credit. Why is any of this important? Why does this matter in the grand scheme of things? Well, other businesses have other ways. What it does is it secures your position in what you're trying to do. Being a single card credited producer on a film, a full producer, which I've now had on 2 movies, it makes a statement. It tells the rest of the industry what they can expect from you, usually. Now, in my case, I usually develop projects, I find projects, and then I work on them until the end. With Tango Shalom, I was a producer, I'm the editor, I was also the post-production supervisor and the VFX supervisor. I designed all the effects and then hired people to implement them. So I did a lot of work, which is a lot more than most producers do, but less than some. So that's where I was at. And what that does is it builds your reputation in the industry. And you have those things, and it's really important. So people argue for credit all the time. There's a lot of people who talk about, well, do they deserve us producing credit? Let me tell you, I am a soup to nuts producer. I find the projects, I develop the projects, I get the money for the projects, I hire people I want to work with, I carry the projects, literally carry them through to the finish line. So certain people who have been questioning whether I can do that or not, no, I can, and I've done it more times than I care to admit. But anyway, why does any of this matter? Well, let's bring it back to what's going on with Scarlett Johansson and Disney and the debacle that this has become. Now, normally, the industry has had a way of doing certain things. How you get credit is one thing, but also how you get paid is another. And we've talked about this on the show before. A lot of times now, the days of, say, Jim Carrey getting $20 million to star in Cable Guy, those kind of went by the wayside because, I've always believed that while actors and talent are absolutely vital and essential to having great films, it really depends what kind of a movie you're making. And one of the things that I've always admired about Scarlett Johansson is her choice of roles. I mean, obviously, she came out of the indie world, did things like Ghost World, but even after she was doing Black Widow for Disney, she did something like Under the Skin, the science fiction adaptation of Michael Faber's novel that I think is a fantastic, one of the great science fiction movies of the modern age. But she's not going to be getting a ton of money. When she stars as Black Widow, like, who knew she was going to come back after Iron Man 2? But as she becomes a vital part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and indeed works on things like Jungle Book, does other Disney movies, she becomes a cornerstone, a foundational piece of talent for the studio. And that's something that can be lucrative, and you want it to keep going. Obviously, she had 2 Best Actress, Best Supporting Actress, Best Actress nominations. She's at the top of her game. She's she's as A-list as it comes. And if you look at her box office grosses, just on the Marvel Universe movies alone, she's somebody that is worth her weight in gold. Now, also on Black Widow, she was a producer on the film. So, you know, and let's be clear. She's dead in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so Black Widow is going to be presumably her swan song. So she's going to get as much as she can, and rightfully so. Why shouldn't she? I mean, she was instrumental in bringing director Kate Shortland in to do the film. She absolutely acted as a producer. She wasn't just taking that title as a vanity title. She brought in the director. That's what a producer does. Finds great elements, puts them all together to make the film. Whether you like the finished movie or not is not really part of the equation, because we're talking about what happens before. Anyway, the world in Hollywood is changing. And in the world of streaming, and what they really want is the studios and the corporations would much rather prefer they pay you once and send you on your merry way. Because if they have things like box office performance bumps, well, the problem with that is that leaves their books open and all of that. You know, talent can come back and be like, I didn't get paid. I'm going to get sued. You got Frank Darabont. You have Art Buchwald in the Coming to America case. Look that one up. And studios don't want that. They don't want anyone to know all the revenue streams and how much money they're making. So it's much more desirable to basically pay people work for hire. Here's what you're going to make. And in the streaming world, it kind of, I mean, I would say this, it makes a little bit more sense because you're not going to be selling things. If you make a TV show like, I don't know, like Friends or ER, it's not going to be sold around the world and make more and more and more money. It's going to go to one place. So streaming and syndicated, worldwide syndication is where a lot of people made a ton of money. That's over and done with. But because that's over and done with, it takes away a lot of revenue streams that previously existed for talent. If you're an actor on a big show, you can live for the rest of your life on that show. But those days are over because we're now living in the streaming world where you get paid once, and presumably your show's not going to run 7 seasons anyway. Netflix doesn't want a show to run 7 seasons. I mean, maybe you'll get a Crown or something like that, but they don't want that because talent wants more money. You know, and as if your show becomes successful and a water cooler show, people are like, show me the money. And there's nothing wrong with that, but our world is changing. And that's something that needs to be carefully considered. And by the way, this is an oversimplification of all of these things, but there's an article that was published by Kim Masters. Kim Masters is very knowledgeable about the business. This article was published in the Hollywood Reporter yesterday, and I wanted to share it because there's a lot. You know, I love the business of Hollywood, and I would consider myself both an observer and a student. I'm always trying to understand how these things are working, and as big tech and streaming services, it's all kind of now intermingled and all of that, and all of our politics, it's all part of the same thing. So to be interested in modern life, modern entertainment or anything, it's all kind of the same things. And what's happened is there's a tremendous sea change that occurred underneath everyone's feet. And I saw this happening when we were working on the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-rays. One of the great things about the Star Trek The Next Generation Blu-rays, and I will say this, what CBS did under the auspices of Ken Ross, or as we like to call him, Big Daddy Ken, one of the great home entertainment or entertainment executives that ever existed in Hollywood. He worked for Andre Blay's Magnetic Video back in the day. He was the man who was instrumental in freeing up all the cash, was able to get it from 3 different sources within CBS to spend the enormous amount of money to remaster Star Trek The Next Generation, to do it correctly, for the most part. I mean, they had to farm it out, and there were some problems. There were some hiccups. I understand. I'm not going to sit there and say it was perfect. But Big Daddy Ken was able to do that, and it was very forward-thinking. However, at the same time, ultimately, the Next Generation, now you'd never want to watch Next Generation the way it used to be. Everyone's so used to the new transfers, which are stunning. But at the time when they came out, the Blu-ray versions of them sold, let's call them a disappointment. And I think that they were disappointing because at the same time that we were coming out and everyone thought, Star Trek fans are going to embrace this. One, I don't think people understood just how much of an upgrade it really was. But at the same time, streaming services, this is 2012, 13, and 14, and we did both Next Generation and Enterprise. And we did the 7 seasons of Next Generation and 5 individual discs where they took 2-part episodes and cut them into movie versions, like Best of Both Worlds and Chain of Command and Unification and all good things. And they just didn't sell as well as it was hoped, and that was because streaming was taking off too. And the thing was, people figured, well, if I can stream these things, they're going to be here always. Why buy them? Well, I would say buy them because our special features kick ass. I still feel that way. If you love Star Trek: The Next Generation, very proud of the special features we did. But the world was changing, and I was watching right underneath as the 3 years it took us to finish Star Trek: The Next Generation and Enterprise. We saw streaming really take off, and one of the cornerstones of streaming was, of course, Star Trek. But anyway, I want to read this article and share this article and kind of discuss it because there's a lot to unpack in this article. And it on its surface, it may just appear to be about the Scarlett Johansson case, but it's about so much more than that. Thank you, Kim Masters. This was published yesterday at 6:45 in the morning on the Hollywood Reporter. Disney versus Scarlett Johansson. Why a ton of lawsuits may be next. Let's set aside for a moment the question of whether Scarlett Johansson has a legal leg to stand on in her fight with Disney over her compensation for Black Widow. Let's even say she doesn't, and that she is, as Disney has publicly contended, greedy and indifferent to the horrors of the pandemic. It doesn't matter. Because even if that were true, all of that were true, industry insiders agree attacking Johansson so personally was a pretty spectacular, unforced error. And many observers are laying that at the feet of CEO Bob Chapek with an assist from a reflexively vindictive top communications officer, Xenia Mucha, and with approval from the lawyers. The person who isn't getting the blame? Outgoing chairman Bob Iger. Quote, "Somebody's playing it like an amateur," says one former Disney executive. Iger's no amateur. A top executive at a rival studio agrees, adding that the whole confrontation seems ill-advised and avoidable. Quote, "It's insane to me. Insane," he says. "Do you think on Bob Iger's watch he would ever have allowed a piece of talent to sue them?" This executive notes that it's possible to settle such disputes by finding creative ways to pay stars without setting undesirable compensation precedents, like pay them as a producer or a consultant. I might have done that in the past. A Disney insider says that blame for the statement is being placed unfairly at Chapek's feet, and, quote, "This was not a unilateral decision nor an edict from him. It is difficult, however, to discern who, if anyone, on the studio side was informed in advance." Disney's posture is being read in Hollywood as Chapek signaling his indifference to star talent. But however indifferent he may be, there is one star Chapek and Disney absolutely, unequivocally need. Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige, who is known to be very unhappy with the studio's attack on one of his superheroes. We have seen before what happens when Feige gets unhappy. After myriad clashes with star-unfriendly Marvel Entertainment chairman Ike Perlmutter, including over Feige's wish to diversify the universe by making Black Panther and Captain Marvel, Perlmutter vanished from the equation amid a 2015 reporting structure change by Iger. My sense was that the strained relationship was threatening Feige's continued success, Iger wrote in his own memoir. And any threat to Feige and his success is simply not something that any Disney fiduciary could allow. It's hard to imagine that anyone else on the creative side, Chief Content Officer Alan Horn, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy, Pixar's Pete Docter, is any happier about having to deal with talent who have witnessed the studio lashing out at a star who, as CAA's Brian Lord pointed out in his unusual public statement, has been Disney's partner on 9 movies, which have earned Disney and its shareholders billions. See, this is why talent relations are so important in Hollywood, because it's the talent, the actors, that are at the forefront of whatever it is, whether it's television or whether it's movies. It's their face that is out front and center. Sometimes a director might be front and center, like I would argue in the case of, say, Suicide Squad. While there's a lot of great actors in it, how often do you see a studio sell a movie on the beautiful, horrible mind of its director, James Gunn, as the trailers for Suicide Squad would have you talk about. I mean, it goes to show you that James Gunn himself, as a director and also a personality, has become very formidable in the echelons of $200 million studio filmmaking. That's unique. But James Gunn has earned that right. He weathered a storm he shouldn't have had to weather, but he did. He kept his nose to the grindstone and is still delivering great movies. I guess we'll find out tonight. I haven't seen it yet. But anyway. But you want your talent to be happy because you hopefully will have a long-term relationship and a fruitful collaboration that gives audiences the world over for decades to come great content. It appears that Chapek, who has been, as noted in Johansson's lawsuit, rewarded on Wall Street for his focus on building Disney Plus, believes it is time to establish that the days of epic 8 or 9-figure profit-sharing paydays are over. He is hardly alone in that belief. Other media giants are also all about the upfront one-time payment. And those profit participants may not seem remotely sane, and those profit participations may not seem remotely sane to most people, but talent and their representatives fought for and won them. And obviously now they're going to fight to keep them. So to put that another way, bringing it back to me, if someone came to me and said, Rob, we love your project, but you have to share your credits with somebody. Well, I've already had my precedent set, so I would have to decide, okay, if I'm going to do that, you got to make it. You got a Big Daddy Bobby over here has got to get paid. If you want me to forego my single card credit, make it worth my while. And if you like the project, look, my whole thing about whatever I work on in Hollywood, it might not be the greatest thing in the world, but I promise you my involvement will make it better. And that's, I think, the story of my life is I've always worked on projects that are, let's call them, maybe creatively challenged. I like to come on and try and see if I can make something better. Like, for instance, when we were given The Hills Run Red, it was supposed to be made for $350 million, and I had suggested, how about I bring on my friend, screenwriter David Scow, who wrote things like The Crow with John Shirley, but he wrote the draft that was shot. And they're like, can you get him to come on? And I'm like, well, yeah, I can. We got to pay him. But, you go to people and you try and make projects better. For me, it's never about the next deal. It's about the deal that I'm on right now. Can we make this movie better? Can we do that? Because at the end of the day, the deal I had, the precedent that I had is less important to me than the project that we're working on. And I can say that because I've really only worked in the indie world, so all I get out of it is if the project is better than it was when I started. I certainly have yet to make the big bucks, although hope springs eternal. But anyway, what I mean to say is that it's very important that when you set precedents, that you stick with them. And if you become somebody who's done 9 successful films for a studio, you've earned the right to share in that victory or that money. I mean, after all, part of the reason that they've had success is because of you. And you need to get compensated commensurately with what you think you're worth or what the studio thinks you're worth. This is how good business is done. The problem is, again, studios don't want that necessarily. They've never wanted that because it makes you a partner with them. They don't want you to be a partner with them. They want to pay you and have you go away. And that's what they're getting with the streaming world. They don't have to pay people over and over and over again. They don't have to send you a fat check every year every time your TV series sells to a foreign. I mean, it's not going to. But the reason that streamers don't want to reveal their numbers is because what's going to happen is talent's going to have the same thing occur. Well, I did a streaming show for you and it got 100 million more views than something else, which means the next time we do something together, pay me. Even though that's pretty much the way it should work. You get rewarded for good work. And if you're somebody that continually hits it out of the park, that's why you're valued. That's why you're valued, by the way, in any business anywhere. You make your name for yourself. If you're successful, you make more money. And in the case of Scarlett Johansson, look, she made a deal, all this stuff, people talking semantics. It doesn't matter how much money she has. Don't think of her as being somebody who's richer than you or richer than you're ever going to be. That isn't the point. The point is that one day you might have a contract with someone and you might do a good job for them and they owe you a performance bump. You don't want to have them come back and go, sorry, we're not going to pay you. It's during a pandemic and we have all these problems. Listen, watch Goodfellas. I don't give a shit about your problem. Your restaurant burned down, fuck you, pay me. That's the way it works. You make a contract with somebody, they get what they deserve. They get what they negotiate. Somebody keeps calling me. It's Lucas Kendall. Hi, Lucas. I can't call you right now. I'm on live. But anyway, that's how it works. Anyway. And those profit participations may not seem remotely sane to most people, but talent and their representatives fought for and won them, and obviously now they're going to fight to keep them. In time, Scarlett Johansson is likely to have company on the battle lines. It's a much bigger existential fight that she's really leading, says producer Jason Blum. Jason Blum is saying this. Now, I have all the admiration in the world for Jason Blum because he's figured out how to make low-budget horror films and get them released theatrically, as evidenced by Lee Whannell's The Invisible Man. Not only was Lee Whannell for $8 million able to accomplish a lot more than, say, Alex Kurtzman did when he tried to make The Mummy. Lee Whannell and Jason Blum proved that you can still make movies for a price and make decent profits. And the fact that he's weighing in on this article is pretty extraordinary. It's a much bigger existential fight that she's really leading, says producer Jason Blum. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's really brave to do, and she's fighting for all of talent. Financially, Blum is already set for multiple lifetimes, but still wants streamers to share revenue with talent in success. He acknowledges his hypocrisy and that he just signed a rich deal with Universal to make 3 Exorcist movies for a large but flat upfront fee, a model that he hopes isn't sustainable. Crazy. But hey, if Jason Blum's going to get paid, Jason Blum, get you paid. The alternative to paying the talent, he notes, is paying the corporation, and how, he asks, is that better? It's the talent that makes all of this stuff. They should be the people that are coddled. I remember I've talked about this before, but I remember seeing stories about the ad agency Chiat Day and all of their advertising, all their brand. What do you call them? The account managers, or the advertisers, the geniuses, the John Hams, the madmen and mad women of Chiat Day. They made sure the environment they worked in was posh, full of whatever you wanted, because they wanted people to be their creative selves, and so they were taken care of. But that's a lot of money, and so why should we pay? It's like Peter Gallagher's character in the movie The Player. He says, why do we need these? Let's get rid of the writers and the directors and whatever, then we'll really have something. And he picks up a newspaper and he's like, look, you put Jimmy Smits in it and you have a sexy sand and deliver. I mean, it's that's what he said in the movie. Disney has been positioning itself as the adversary in chief for many months. Chapek, who did a stint in home video before moving on to consumer products and then to theme parks, has been leaning on numbers while leaving the messy talent relations business to executives at the studio. It has hardly been an easy job as he took the helm in a time of crisis with shuttered theme parks and movie theaters. By late 2020, as studios began shifting movies that had been put into production with the expectation of an exclusive theatrical release onto their streaming services, agents began to complain that Disney was distinguishing itself, and not in a good way, in negotiations with key talent. Disney is by far the most ridiculous on deals, one high-level agent said, and then added another. Their initial deals and offers were dog shit, terrible for first dollar gross players. Those are people that get, from the first dollar gross, they get money. Very few people have that. In December, Warner Media had a hold my beer moment when it moved its 2021 slate to HBO Max without warning. Hollywood struck back, and Warner's got the memo, writing top dollar checks to important talent and committing to an exclusive theatrical run for its 2022 movies. Even if that hadn't happened, there's little doubt that the studio would have been dragged into court before Disney. See, what Warner Brothers did when they went day and date with their movies this year, I understand it's during a pandemic, they didn't even talk to their talent. I mean, their talent has deals in place, especially on these larger films like Dune or, take your pick, Guardians of the Galaxy. Faux pas, sorry, The Suicide Squad. If you do that, suddenly you've basically told your talent, like, we're hobbling you because you're now not going to make nearly as much money as you were going to make if this went box office only. And the thing is, their decision to do that is fine, but you're violating the terms of an agreement. You can't just unilaterally change. It's not like Vader on Bespin. You can't alter the deal. You can't say, I don't alter it any further. You can't do that. You can't be going like Lando Calrissian, this deal is getting worse all the time. And Lobot's just nodding. We can't do that. In December, Warner Media had a hold my beer moment. Oh, I already read that. Now Hollywood can focus its ire on the Bob Chapek regime. Not to suggest that agencies would ever collude. That would be illegal. But it would hardly be surprising to see Disney face litigation next from a client represented by a different agency. Maybe Emma Stone and WME. That's William Morris Endeavor. Industry insiders say at this point, with the battle begun, a lot of people want to sue a lot of people. Let's hope not. What the streamers are betting on is that in the next 3 to 5 years, there will only be 3 or 4 of them left pumping content into homes, and they'll be so powerful that they will be able to push the price down of producing, of paying talent, of paying producers, of paying writers and directors, says Jason Blum. I personally don't think they'll be able to do it, but that's what they're betting on. Jason Blum is absolutely right. Once they control, everyone's going to, it's going to be like, please, streamers, may I have some more? Everyone's going to be all over fucking Twist, man. We're going to be begging because everybody's going to want to be in business with Netflix or HBO Max or whatever, and they're going to be the only game in town. And then people will be able to say to even the biggest producers, the biggest stars, well, we might make your film, but you got to take a 50% pay cut. And what are people going to say? No. And so this is exactly where the industry wants us to go. They have never wanted to pay talent what they're worth, ever. Why do that? Because they're corporations. They want to keep that money for themselves. Hey, it makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. Another prominent producer thinks they will be able to do it, but doesn't think it will be good for the industry. Quote, from this point on, it's just going to be work for hire, he says. It's a huge sea change for everyone. You'll still get a huge payment up front. It's just not going to be huge home runs anymore. And with time, those fees will get smaller. But having been offered such deals, this person says, it doesn't matter to me whether my movie is a huge hit or not. Now, this is the scariest thing. The pressure's off. He doesn't want to embarrass himself, but a project just needs to be good enough to get to the next deal. This may help explain why so many movies made for streamers seem so lackluster. Jason Blum concurs. On a streaming movie, if you're not participating in the upside or downside, I think that compromises the creative process, Blum says, as he's counting on a ton of lawsuits in the hope that eventually there will be sharing and streaming, just like there has been for 50 years in the business. Now, this is incredibly important. If you are talent and you are participating in the creation of something and you are rewarded for its excellence, it makes you work even harder. There are times on Tango Shalom working in the low-budget indie realm, and I'll tell you, it's been a number of years since I've worked on this project. I have wanted to take this computer that I'm talking to you on right now and toss it, like Oliver Stone was rumored to do on Nixon, out a window. There was a time when I really was threatening to erase. I hadn't heard from my New York producers in a long time. And I thought we had a plan in action to move forward. And this entire movie has lived on my equipment. And I just didn't hear from them for 6 months. And I'm like, but I don't give up. I never surrender. I stuck with the film. And even today, I was changing it, making it better. And if you're incentivized, you'll always try and make something better. Now, I think making movies is too hard. I can't even imagine anyone working on a motion picture and not wanting it to be the best it can be. But I've worked with other people in the past who have said, we don't get any more money if the movie's good or bad. We've already pre-sold the film, so why knock ourselves out? And I'm like, well, what about your name being on it? I'm like, we got 2 or 3 other projects. Maybe one of them will turn out great. Well, as a creator myself, I don't have that luxury. Every project I work on might be my last, so it incentivizes me. I just want things to be good anyway. No one will ever accuse me of holding out for the most money, to my great detriment. But the real important thing is, what do we value here? If we value great content, and I think all of us do, that means that the people that make the great content, your favorite creators, need to be incentivized, because it ain't show friends. It is show business. And it's very important that the business stays viable for the creators. Otherwise, I don't want to have some patron of the arts have to give me money while I sit and edit low budget movies here in the Robservatory. I don't want that to happen. What I want is I want to get paid for my enthusiasm, my ability, and what I bring to a project, and how I plus it at the end when the project's finished. You're like, wow, Rob, you really made this project. I was told that today, as a matter of fact, that I was actually told if I wasn't working on this project, it never would have been completed, which to a certain extent could be true, but you never know. You could have hired somebody just like me, and they would have made sure they were carrying it across the finish line as well. But the important thing is, we need to work in a world where our work is appreciated and you make money based on that. You do good work, you should reap the benefits of how much time and effort you put into something. And that's what this is really all about. How will talent make out moving forward? I've been told, I've watched my own indie status as a producer, as a editor, as a post supervisor. It's been completely diminished since I started 20 years ago, actually 25 years ago. And a friend of mine told me, a director friend told me, he goes, you know what? We working in the low budget arena that we stay in, we've all become professional hobbyists, because we certainly can't make a living with what we're doing, but we'll do everything we can if it takes us months or even years to make sure the project's the best it can be. So it's a very interesting time. And like the last paragraph of this article says, this is what a executive said. Let me read this again. It doesn't matter to me whether my movie is a huge hit or not. The pressure's off. He doesn't want to embarrass himself, but a project just needs to be good enough to get the next deal. Hello, Star Trek. That's where we're at. Star Trek, the cornerstone of CBS Viacom, their one franchise. It doesn't really matter if Star Trek is great or not. Just got to keep that machine churning. Keep that machine churning. Because after all the old school fans that are complaining about it, they'll be dead soon. Why do we have to make it good? Well, the funny thing is the reason Star Trek is 55 years old is because it used to be very good, and it endured. It endured. But really, that's what the business is about. Got to get that next deal in place. So, yeah. Anyway, let's see what you guys have to say. I have so many letters that I need to read. Thomas Bennett writes in. Thomas Bennett says, it was good to be in movie studio before 2020. Hey, Rob, I'm up late. I've had too much caffeine and I can't sleep. I've heard you say either on the John Campea show or somewhere else that a movie has to gross 3 to 4 times its budget to be profitable. My question is this. Who thought Jungle Cruise could possibly make $600 to $800 million? Well, I just answered my own question. I did some research. And the majority of Dwayne Johnson's latest films have grossed between $600 and $8 million at the box office. $600, $800 million. And I suppose the star of the movie can be an indicator of how well a movie might do. And it's something that people who analyze this stuff can actually point to as a variable that makes sense. Indeed, Monday morning quarterbacking is something I don't like at all. Still, it seems to me that $200 million is an awful lot of money to gamble when you have to make a return of at least $600 million in order to make that a winning bet. It's 3-1 odds. I get that the pandemic ruined everything. I get that no one could have predicted the pandemic, and I just looked up the cost for doing Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl. That was $140 million. So I guess the point of this email is simply to say it was great to be a Hollywood studio up until March 2020. After doing this research, I guess my middle-class sensibilities still can't wrap my head around someone greenlighting a project for over $100 million when you have to make 3 times to 4 times that much in order to make a profit. I know you've said anyone making movies is trying to make the best movie they possibly can, and I absolutely agree with you. I guess the poker player in me would rather gamble on 4 $50 million projects or 10 $20 million projects, because very little is certain in terms of earning potential in Hollywood, especially a non-franchise movie that isn't a remake. To be clear, I don't think Hollywood should only make sequels and remakes. I'm only saying make more movies with smaller budgets. It spreads out the risk and it gets more movies made. I hope this letter finds you well. As always, thanks for the discussion. P.S. Scarlett Johansson should just win Disney in her lawsuit, and Bob Chapek should be forced to resign simply because he allowed that rude, stupid statement to go out about the lawsuit. He clearly doesn't know how to get the best out of creative people. I wish Disney employees the best as they navigate these troubling times. And Scarlett, if I had $50 million to spare, you could have it. Thanks for always playing captivating female characters. Well, I'll tell you something, Thomas. Now, I don't know if this is true anymore, but the reason, do you know why Hollywood studios would rather make $100 million movies than $50 million movies? Because it is demonstrably provable, at least it used to be, that $100 million movies were better bets. A movie that cost $100 million or more, for the most part, used to have a bigger return. A lot of movies that are $50 million, a lot more movies that were only $50 million, failed. But $100 million movies proved, if you started, the first $100 million movie was Terminator 2. And when you started looking at that, when we crossed that Rubicon and went over to $100 million, the reason that $100 million movies suddenly became desirable was because of the return. And it was undeniable. You could look at that. Now, there have been some spectacular flameouts at $100 million. I'm not saying that every $100 million movie is a moneymaker. But if you got to that budget level, if you look like, okay, if there's $100 million movies and $150 million movies, you'd have a lot more hits in the $100 million range. And that there's a lot of reasons for that, but that's true. I mean, look, once you cross that Rubicon in the early 90s and you got up to that $100 million level, and people are like, wow, the first $100 million movie was Terminator 2, and look what that did. I mean, hell, people are still watching that shit today because it was dope. And, of course, it changed the movie business. I mean, James Cameron, one of the things that people don't give him enough credit for is he's doing R&D for the entire entertainment business. Everything that he does later becomes adopted and becomes de rigueur for the industry. You know, the pseudopod in the Abyss was pushing technology that was later utilized for the T-1000 in Terminator 2, and then went on 2 years later to be Jurassic Parking it up in this hizzle. So he's always on the cutting edge of technology, and everything he comes up with later becomes industry standard. So they're not just spending $100 million on Jimmy C. They are spending $100 million on Jimmy C being the innovator that he is. Who knows what I'm most excited to see the Avatar sequels, if nothing else, than to see what JC came up with. We'll see. I don't know, but I'm sure it's going to be amazing. But Thomas, thank you for your letter. You know, I got to say, you people, what do you mean, you people? I mean, you people, you should, we have a smart bunch that watches this show. I want to say thank you to that, because you imagination connoisseurs, you're a smart bunch of folks, and I'm proud to know you. Proud to know you. Our man Donnie Pearson writes in. Donnie Pearson, longtime member of the Post-Geek Singularity. Hello, Rob and fellow imagination connoisseurs. Hope everyone's weekend was well. Well, it's been a few days since then. It's been 27 years since Playmates Toys released the classic Star Trek Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover toy line that had the Heroes on a Half Shell dress up in the original series era Starfleet uniforms. Recently, there was news that our good friends at Hasbro released the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover toy line that is based on the comic book crossover, co-published by BAM and IDW. This morning came the first look at the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles morphed Donatello Black Ranger and morphed Leonardo Blue Ranger figures. I can't wait to afford them sometime. Here's the hope and joy that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover toy line would be as more phenomenal as the Star Trek Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover toy line. Let me know what you think, and may the turtle power protect you. Thank you for reading. Like you said, Rob, always place your characters before your universe, not the other way around. Donnie Pearson, and Donnie Pearson is good enough to include a photo. Wow, these are pretty dope. I haven't seen these. Let me put this up for you. Thank you, Donnie, for sending this picture along. I'm going to put it up so you can see it. These are the two of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers meet the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean, I guess maps are going to be here. Oh, you know what? I just sorry, picked the wrong picture. I don't know why I picked the wrong picture. I guess that's just me. Let me get the right picture. It's right here. Sorry about that. These live faux pas, you never know. So here you go. Look at this. Here are the heroes on a half shell, and they have the power. I know that's He-Man, but there you go. The Mighty Morphin Power Rangers meet the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Those figures are kind of dope. Why only 2 of them? Where's the rest? Where's the rest of them? But that's pretty cool, Donnie Pearson. Thank you for writing in. Pretty exciting stuff. This next one comes from our friend Electron Star Collapse. Hail to the Viceroy of Verisimilitude and the Post-Geek Singularity community. When I take a look back into history, there seems to be a universal appeal for heroes. We can argue for centuries whether or not Homer was real and a singular author, but we cannot deny the endurance of the great epics told under his name. The Iliad and the Odyssey remain potentially the oldest stories of Western canon that modern audiences still follow. These are stories that take place at the end of the Bronze Age, telling stories of people that have been dead longer than many trees have even lived. But those were not stories about perfect men perfectly being perfect in perfection. These are stories about flawed men and women, flawed gods and goddesses, even flawed titans and monsters. These are stories that examined ourselves as people and as persons. Most of these stories are certainly of people that are greater than what life offers us, but they still teach us that even the greatest of us can make mistakes, and absolution is oftentimes a difficult journey to partake. These stories have universal appeal as well. We may be able to look to Virgil or Ovid for more ancient Western works, and later Dante, Boccaccio, Chaucer, and others for later classics. This only looks at Europe. China eventually gave us stories such as The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West, and Water Margin. From the Middle East, we would get the 1001 Nights, often known as the Arabian Nights to Western audiences, as well as other tales like The Seven Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor. Faithful to the original text or not, many of these stories have been so important to the human species, they were deemed worthy of adaptation into Hollywood pictures. Storytelling has changed over the millennia, but surprisingly, not a whole lot. We might not appreciate the rhythm or flow of older stories, but the messages they offer still resonate through our favorite stories told today. We can look at stories like Star Wars and Masters of the Universe for a story about the importance of being your best self and the difficulty of fighting against the evil that obstructs us. Stories like Star Trek took us one step further, giving us a society that finally overcame itself, and see if the universe has more to teach us. I believe it was best said by Benjamin Sisko. It is the unknown that defines our existence. We are constantly searching, not just for answers to our questions, but for new questions. Now, don't get me wrong, He-Man is nothing like the Iliad. The Iliad literally begins with rage and ends in sorrow, while He-Man is a series of heroic labors targeted for children, but they both entertain and they both teach us about ourselves. Which begs me to ask the question, why must we change our methods of storytelling? New creators want to subvert existing works and recreate them in a new vision. Definition of subvert, according to Merriam-Webster transitive verb: 1, to overturn or overthrow from the foundation, ruin. 2, to pervert or corrupt by an undermining of morals, allegiance, or faith. These new creators want to take away the heroic stories that we've loved for a millennia. They want to replace flawed heroes with ones that are perfect. They don't even take the weakness of our old heroes to destroy them. They have to create new, uncharacteristic weaknesses to make us disgusted with our old heroes. We can certainly look backwards to some old great stories that give us hope and desire, but what do we have to look forward to? We don't have heroes in modern storytelling, only dogmatic saviors. We don't see the struggles one must learn from in order to succeed. We see how the hubris of a select few or one is their own power. Hubris. We see how their companions praise their hero for doing nothing or beg for their hero's forgiveness when they try to be heroic themselves. The old stories told us that anyone can be a hero, but there are consequences. These new stories teach us never to be a hero and just give your support to the dogmatic savior. No. Especially in these trying times, we need real heroes more than ever. We need stories about people who are able to surmount the blows that they take, not stories about people who, without facing a challenge. We are all being challenged every day. We all want to escape from the challenge every day. What we don't need is a story telling us that the struggle is meaningless. What we don't need is a story telling us we're never going to be a hero. What we don't need is our heroes being subverted. Maybe we need to create our own heroes because right now, what we aren't being given are heroes. Stay safe and don't let the stars collapse on you. What a great letter, Electron Star Collapse. And I have to say, I feel you. And I find it, look, I think all of this sort of stems from a number of different places, but I think a lot of it comes from the fact that on one hand, we have an impulse to help people rise up. We want to take people that have been downtrodden, people that haven't been heard, the people that are voiceless, and give them a voice. I certainly know I do. And my idea is, and I would like to see that everybody is sort of risen up. But the problem is, we seem to want to do that at the expense of people that are already there, which I don't understand. I listen to a lot of Thomas Sowell. He is a conservative thinker. He's in his 90s now. He's a black man. People would call him rather conservative, but I find his ideas to be very appealing. And I know people might say, well, Rob, are you turning into a raging conservative? And I'm like, well, you know, don't label me. And when I watch his videos, there's a lot of interviews. Like he's interviewed a lot by this guy at the Hoover Institute. And I was watching something this morning with Elizabeth, and he said something really, really interesting that I thought was fascinating. He was talking about poverty. He's written a lot about intellectuals and poverty and things like that. And he made a point. He said, you know, we're always looking for the root causes of poverty to combat poverty. And he's like, you know what we're not doing? What we're not doing is we're not looking at the root causes of people that aren't in poverty and trying to help people that are in poverty come up to this level. We're trying to solve poverty, which in the history of humanity, he points out, has never been solved. Mankind came out of poverty. We had nothing. You know, when the monolith gave us our idea about how to kill our neighbors in 2001, you know, we were as poor as can be. We were fighting over the puddle that was in the land. That's how poor we were. We were the poorest of the poor. So our natural state is poor. We have nothing. And that what we should be doing is help people rise up, teach people that are in poverty how can they not be in poverty anymore by giving them tools that they need rather than solve poverty, which you can't ever solve. You've got to teach people that are in poverty how to get up and succeed. And he was making that point. I thought I never really thought of it that way. You know, it's the same. The same is true of like the housing problem with the homeless. We've never been able to solve the housing problem by building more housing, because that's not really the problem with the homeless. There are other underlying problems, but by calling them those things, people are like, oh, you can't say that. But really what we have to do is solve the underlying problems. And if we don't solve the underlying problems, we'll never solve that problem. And it was very interesting. And I'm a big fan of his, Thomas Sowell. I know a lot of people like, Rob, are you turning into a conservative before our eyes? I wouldn't call myself a conservative because I don't think that I am conservative, because I'm a fan of alternative lifestyles and all that kind of thing that are definitely not conservative because they exist. But anyway, I don't want to get into that right now because I'm reading letters from you guys. But when it comes back to our heroes, I don't understand. We're now living in a world where, like Electron Star Collapse pointed out, we want to get rid of all of our heroes because what we have to make everybody's like wants to be equal. We want to feel better. We'll all live in a collectivist, Marxist, ideological Shangri-La of utopian ideals. Because, by the way, it'll never work because human beings aren't that way. We have ambition. We have individuality. That's what we want. We don't want to live in some collectivist nightmare. It's never worked, ever, and it never will. Ever. Because that's not what human beings are. And the thing is, we shouldn't want everybody to be equal at the same level. Nope. The state, we're all going to be the same. We're not the same. We're not the same. You know why we need heroes? Because we want to aspire to be those people. I don't want to live in a world where there's people I don't aspire to be. Even in filmmaking. I mean, I look at the gods of filmmaking. I look at my big heroes. People like Stanley Kubrick's my favorite director. I look at Kurosawa. I look at Martin Scorsese. I look at Francis Coppola, Spielberg, all the greats. I'll never be as good as they are. But that's okay. It's okay. I'll never be as good as they are. I can strive to be as good as they are, but all I can do is be the best me that exists. And that's the funny thing. We always want to point to other people. Why is that person? Why do they get to be that way? Because they are. That's how they are. And rather than wish that they were more like me, I should be more like them. And you know what? Do better. Be more talented. Work harder. You know, if you want to be the best self that you can be the best self. Don't resent people because they're their best selves. Remember the advice I heard that made me want to work for this director that never made another movie after I worked for him, which was, in his movie, this coach of this minor league baseball team tells William Russ, Buckwheat from Wise Guys, says, listen, it doesn't matter how good anyone else is. It doesn't make you any better or any worse. Truer words were never spoken, man. Truer words were never spoken. I'm a big fan of that. So I don't know why we want to subvert expectations and take all of our heroes and take them down a peg. Why? Is that because no one can be heroic anymore? I mean, I like Achilles. You know? I like Brad Pitt. As he gets older, he's still like one of the most handsome men in the world. I'm like, you know what? I like that I live in a world where there's excellent people that do excellent things. I think it's a great place to be. I look at those people and I don't feel threatened. They inspire me. And this idea, you know, when I look at characters that I don't believe in, like half the cast of Discovery, I'm like, why are you showing this to me? How is this doing anybody any good? Anyway, a good letter, Electron Star Collapse, and I thank you for writing it in. Nicholas Perea? I think so. Hi, Rob. I hope you're okay. Some time ago, I asked myself a question. I wondered when Warner Brothers decided that Superman had become an outdated character. I ask myself this question in those terms because I still don't understand what they mean by that. Is Superman a character that audiences no longer care about? Based on the success of the various TV series released over the past 25 years, or the money it makes from DC to the sale of comic books, this is clearly not true. Not to mention that Superman Returns and Man of Steel were expected films before their release. Paradoxically, the recent projects that have divided the most are the ones where they felt compelled to make the character more sullen. Isn't it time for Warner Brothers to bring an authentic version of Clark Kent to theaters? A version in the genre of Superman the Animated Series and Superman and Lois? Would Warner Brothers really take a risk in making this decision, or is it too late and the woke era motivates them more to develop a film on xenophobia? Thank you for the answer and keep up the good work. Well, I think you answered your own question, Nicholas. I think the problem with Superman is it's really hard to make a traditional Superman story because Superman is so powerful. First of all, you need an antagonist. Who's going to be his antagonist? That works within the context of the kind of movie we want to see. One of the reasons I like Man of Steel so much is because it was more of a science fiction first context story, but also, you know, it gave you an antagonist in Zod or a villain, however you want to see him, that made sense within the context of the film. So, yeah. Man, I love this. I got to say, I love this root beer Zevia. John got me hooked. But, yeah, so I think that that's the problem. It's really hard in this day and age. You know, you either want to show yourself as being so aware, call it woke, call it progressive, whatever you want to call it, or, I mean, Superman, the way you just described him, is more of a throwback. to an era of a simpler time. Like, do we want to go back to watching, say, Leave It to Beaver? Like, could you do a modern remake of Leave It to Beaver where parents know everything and kids make mistakes and parents... No, for 30 years we've had Bart Simpson because Bart Simpson's smarter than his parents. There's a really odd thing that our culture has done, especially in pop culture, has made parents... I mean, that's one of the reasons I like Friday Night Lights so much. Friday Night Lights was at its core was about a functioning family. And I thought that was great. I like families. I think functioning families are great. I think we're in our best state when we have them. And I think it's something that's natural and biological, and it probably works better. I'm not saying all families are perfect, but now we're trying to subvert everything. Everything gets subverted because, gosh, why have traditions at all, right? But I think that's the problem with Superman. Superman is a product of a bygone era, and the big problem is how do you either go grimdark with Superman, or you have to angst him up, or something to make him more palatable to modern audiences, and that's tough. It's a hard thing to do. A bummer. Wow, okay, this comes from Ben. Oh wait, this is a private message. I can't read it, but it's a great letter. I wish I could read it out loud, but I can't. I want to read it out loud, but I can't. James Wallace writes in. Hi Rob, I'm writing this while watching Midnight Metal with your guests and Tom, August 1st, 2021. It's strange that I remember my childhood pretty vividly at times, and when you and Tom were talking about videos with regard to when they were available for purchase. I was only 4 in 1982, but I remember that period. Also remember the teaser for Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom where they just showed the map and mentioned Spielberg and Lucas beside the map they showed Jones saying, "Trust me." You can see that, by the way, on YouTube. Right before watching Raiders of the Lost Ark on VHS. That was the time the home video market started to take off. You are correct. Plus, if I remember correctly, the Star Wars trilogy wasn't available for purchase until 1985 or 86. E.T. wasn't available until 1988, and I think you got a big bag of Reese's Pieces if you bought the VHS for $19.99. Now, I didn't have any great makeout sessions with a girlfriend to watch Star Wars on a bootleg. I did watch Star Wars on 16 millimeter at the Babysitters, where the film was like 20 minutes. The girl at the Babysitters was cute, though. Anyways, I digress. My dad brought home some bootlegs of The Empire Strikes Back and E.T. for me, where someone in a movie theater recorded the film, or my grandpa recording Star Wars off HBO, and the tape didn't start until the cantina scene. It was infectious and fun listening to all of you talk this morning due to the fact you brought up Titanic and other fun films, which makes me think that the 1990s was probably the last great decade for filmmaking. There were some great films in the aughts and the teens, but with the 90s you got the best of both worlds, great independent films and great studio movies. There were certain films that while you were watching you could feel the gravity of those films. You knew you were watching greatness or something that would influence pop culture. I was in my freshman year of college when Titanic was released. Even in the Midwest, we heard about the rumors that James Cameron's magnum opus would be this flop that would sink 2 studios. But then the Golden Globes nominated the film for everything. And on opening day, I went with my family to go see the behemoth known as Titanic. And it was special. The film is fucking great. I understand the criticisms. However, there was a reason that film captured the audience, and I think I saw it 5 times in the theater, a few times with my girlfriend at that point. That's the thing. Films and songs are attached to our memories, and when the films are something that are great, it just makes the memories that much better. My dad and I talk on the phone every few days, and we'll talk about Raiders or great films we saw together for the first time. After talking to my dad or listening to you guys tonight, I get both excited and sad. Excited to have had these experiences, which are kind of sacred now, and sad that there really hasn't been anything lately to match those films we grew up with. Funny how Netflix released the 2nd season of The Movies That Made Us. I watched the Back to the Future episode. It was really good. All of those films had an impact of sorts. Pretty Woman, Jurassic Park, Forrest Gump. Those 3 films are just a portion of a handful of films that were trailblazers of sorts in the 90s. Hopefully, films get back to being influential again like the films I mentioned. I think the closest we got as far as crowds and anticipation was The Force Awakens, which, sorry, wasn't a trailblazer of a film, just a trailblazer of anticipation and marketing. Here's hoping, Rob. Here's hoping. Well, James, a great letter. Thank you for writing in. I think that, you're not wrong, but I'll tell you. I think what happened as soon as movies started moving over that $100 million mark that we were talking about is they became much more risky to make. And the reason that the business changed is because before you could make a movie like Back to the Future that was less than $20 million. Very iterative, by the way, as you learn in the movies that made us. How I didn't realize how much of the movie they'd filmed with Eric Stoltz. I think they said 6 weeks, and they had to go back and start over. That's an astonishing thing that they were able to do, but the studio allowed them to do it because you weren't spending $100 million. And they were able to go back and do it fairly quickly for cheap. I think that's the big problem with the entertainment business is they got out of the affordable entertainment and they started. Look, when you start chasing $100 million spent to $1 billion gross, I get it. It makes economic sense. And suddenly the film business was making movies. I mean, let's face it. The reason Terminator 2 became such a huge success and the reason that they were willing to spend $100 million on it was because on video, the Terminator, home video and on cable, Terminator was huge. People watched it 100 million times. And so when they announced Terminator 2, I mean, it's like, oh my God, people freaked the fuck out. It's like Terminator, everyone had seen Terminator. If you didn't see it on cable, you have the tape. The Thorn EMI. VHS tape. I mean, everybody was Terminator crazy. So it's like, well, and that movie had an accelerated production schedule. Yeah, man, we'll get that in the theaters in like a year. And everybody went and saw it because it was dope. And everyone loved the Terminator. So it made sense. But nowadays, they're expecting us to go to spend all this kind of money. And it's not sustainable. And the problem is, the reason is, ironically, the reason that movies aren't as special anymore is because when you're spending $100 million, you can't risk anything. You think if you're spending $100 million, you're going to make a movie that's based on an IP no one's ever heard of, or an original spec script? Hell no. If you're a studio executive, you'll lose your job. If you roll the dice on $100 million plus, and let's face it, it's not even $100 million anymore. It's $150 to $200 million. I mean, $200 million. If you're a studio executive, what are you going to bet on? Something I goddamn well know is going to work, because I ain't going to be one of those people that's like, Rob Burnett, he oversaw a $200 million flop for Warner Brothers. My life's over. My career's in the toilet. I mean, I'm used to that, but I mean, it's what are you going to do? So, as a result, the way studios are making movies, they cannot innovate, and they cannot do things that are unique or risky because they cost $150 million, and you can't. So you have to. So then studios are forced into making things that we already know. Sequels, reboots, whatever. And when you've already seen them, traditionally, how can you get excited for something that you've already really seen? I mean, the great excitement when I was a kid growing up, you didn't know what the fuck you were going to get. I remember seeing the early trailer for Poltergeist. I knew Steven Spielberg produced it and Tobe Hooper directed it, but I don't know if it's online, but look for the Poltergeist advanced trailer or teaser when they're interviewing people. Like, can you imagine, like, somebody, well, they did remake Poltergeist, but it's like, okay, nowadays you want to do something like that? Nobody would ever let you make it. And when the studios are thinking like that, we're shit out of luck when it comes to original material, unfortunately. It's unfortunate, but that's the truth. That's where I tried to remind them that we, the Dutch, used to fund world conquest all the time. New Amsterdam, Indonesia, Suriname, and even a bit in South Africa. Is it Suriname? And even a bit in South Africa, but suddenly, no, colonialism isn't cool anymore. Fine. I'll go back to writing the reviews thing, and since Willow Yang already has Trek covered, I thought I would talk about The Bad Batch. And to deal with that whole pesky spoiler thing, I figured that I should begin at Episode 1, Aftermath. The recap. Starting on the last day of the Clone Wars, we see how Order 66 affects Clone Force 99. While 4 of the members are immune to the order, number 5, Crosshair, is activated. This causes tension between him and the rest of the unit. Things do not get better as the unit is assigned to a new mission to eliminate Saw Gerrera and his resistance cells. Led by Hunter, The unit refused to execute the mission and returns to base only to be promptly arrested. Complicating the whole story is the squad meeting Omega, a young female clone, a Bad Batch fangirl. She's an enhanced clone like them. Curious, she quickly finds herself in trouble and also ends up arrested. While the Bad Batch manage to escape, with Omega in tow, Crosshair ends up brainwashed into an evil Imperial stooge, and we're off to the races. My judgment. An excellent episode. We see Clone Force 99 struggling with these shifting conditions in the galaxy. As for the character of Omega, she takes some getting used to, but since this is the first episode, there's simply not enough material to judge her on yet. Yeah, it's a short judgment and a long recap, but this is my first review, so that balance will probably change later on. Best regards, Ruben Hilbers. Well, you know how, Ruben, I love the Dutch. Renee Stoutsendijk and Monique van de Ven, those Dutch ladies, lived in my dreams when I was a young man. So, love the Dutch. Big fan of the Dutch. Well, thanks for writing in. You know, I've been hit and miss on the Bad Batch. It's pretty cool. The Hot Toys figures are good, though. But yeah, I want it to be better than it is, I think. Maybe. But definitely pretty good. Omar94 writes in. Rob Moderators and the Post-Geek Singularity. I know you're excited to see Dune later this year if it doesn't get delayed, but I'm still a little cold towards it. Don't get me wrong, I want to see it since I'm interested in how it will turn out, but I'm not hugely excited the way you are. I think my problem comes from the fact that I haven't liked the trailers that much. I don't dislike them, but they really haven't done it for me. I also think I'll go in with the same feeling I had with Denis Villeneuve's last movie, Blade Runner 2049. I don't think the trailers were that good for that movie, but when it came out and I saw it, everyone liked it, but I didn't, even though there was praise toward it. I think that might be my reason for being a little cold towards Dune. I feel like it will be praised, but I won't like it when I see it. Well, come on, brah. Why do you say that? Also, I don't know if Villeneuve will be able to pull it off, even though he's a perfectly competent filmmaker, due to previous attempts not working out. Having seen the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune and liking it, I don't know if that version would have been a good movie, but would have been interesting to see. Ridley Scott was approached but didn't make it. David Lynch made the movie, but it didn't do well. In a documentary about Lynch's movies, Impression of Dune, Harlan Ellison doubted a Dune movie would work, saying it's a book which should be left as a book. When talking about Lynch's movie, he was still surprised the movie got made, as he's quoted as saying, "It was a book that shouldn't have been shot. It was a script that couldn't have been written. It was a directorial job that was beyond anyone's doing. It was a production that would beggar the imagination and bankrupt 3 studios. It was a production that could not possibly be marketed in any way that anyone could understand or that they would want to go to. It didn't hit its audience. It looked like it insulted its audience. It looked like it defamed its original creator, and yet the film was made." However, I will have to wait and see how Dune is when it comes out. I did like Arrival, but I did not like Blade Runner 2049, so I'll see whether or not I like Villeneuve's next science fiction movie. Maybe Villeneuve will be the one to pull Dune off, since you've said you've read and liked the script. Or he won't, and shows Dune probably just doesn't work as an adaptation the way Ellison believed. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, I would say this. I think even if all you've ever watched about Dune is the trailer and you knew nothing else, you still have to admire what's going on. I mean, there's interesting scope there, a lot of scope there. There's interesting characters. It must intrigue you on some level. And you didn't say in the article that you wrote, or the letter you wrote, whether or not you like Blade Runner 2049. I think one of the things that's amazing about Blade Runner 2049 is it's based on a movie that was a flop. Here's another thing about the studios. When you're thinking like, okay, should we spend $175 million or whatever on Blade Runner 2049? There's no evidence. I love Blade Runner. As you all know, I contributed an essay to the book, The Cyberpunk Nexus, an exploration of the Blade Runner universe, which, by the way, you can get on Amazon. And I was proud to contribute to that book. Blade Runner made no money. Only in movie circles do people love that, maybe science fiction circles. The original Blade Runner still, might as well call it a cult movie. And yet people are like, oh, I love Blade Runner. Well, that's great. You can love Blade Runner. But it doesn't mean the movie was a good bet financially. Like, who thought spending $170 million on Blade Runner, a movie I don't think has come anywhere near, the original Blade Runner has never come anywhere near grossing that much money, is a good idea? Because why? People are like, well, everyone, Rob's watched it, just like what I said earlier about Terminator. We've all seen Terminator, so let's put $100 million into Terminator 2. Well, at that point, it made sense, but Blade Runner has never been the kind of movie. Blade Runner, to me, is one of the great litmus tests. There are people that either like Blade Runner or people that don't. There are people that know Roy Batty's speech at the end and people that don't. And I think the people that love Blade Runner are outnumbered by the population probably 10-1 or 9-1 if there's 10 of us. Just a thought. Don't know if that's true, but I kind of think it might be. This is a great letter. Not that all your letters aren't great. John Webb writes in. John Webb says, hello, RMB. Short-time viewer, first-time writer. I am 52. I love the original Star Trek. There's one aspect of original Trek that I don't hear mentioned very much. Ooh, this is such a salient point. Gene Roddenberry saw combat in World War II and also worked as a policeman. Gene Kuhn served in World War II, and I've heard that others in the production, like, well, James Doohan, served in World War II. The original Star Trek is, in part, a military man's fantasy. Men from different backgrounds forced to work together and to focus on their common mission. By the time we meet them, they've also developed a respect for each other. This is perhaps an idealized version of many men's experience serving in the military, and a vision that fascinated many fans of Star Trek. There's a lot of TNG, etc. that I haven't seen. I thought the TNG Enterprise was ugly on the outside, and the captain having a couch on his bridge sitting with two of his buddies in front of his huge flat-screen TV did not impress me very much. I haven't seen new Star Trek except for the movies. I'll let Red Letter Media and now you entertain me by letting me know how un-Star Trek the new series are. But one thing I really noticed about the Kelvin timeline was the complete lack of military discipline. Everyone runs away from their post without being relieved or even getting permission and runs through the hallways to do whatever. Most people will focus on the Kelvin Kirk as an example of lack of military discipline. Well, I mainly noticed Uhura. Originally a mature and dignified military officer, Kelvin Uhura is played as a working-class girl who went to community college, who tells it like it is and won't take any shit, telling Spock she doesn't like her ship assignment and abandons her post several times. I think I'll give her a pass on sucking face with a superior officer, since there's barely room in the Enterprise for the needed oxygen with all the hormones filling the air and making them all shout and run all the time. She must have breathed enough in to not be able to help herself. This lack of discipline isn't limited to Starfleet. James T. Kirk as a child is not at all a stack of books with legs, taking life and studies seriously, but some punk-ass little jerk driving a 300-year-old car off a cliff. I hope, before Loki has his way with the Time Variance Authority, that they might be allowed to erase a few splinter timelines that we share a distaste for. Anyway, thank you for your passion for excellence and your hatred of stupidness and shittiness. Well, John Webb, thank you for that first-time letter. You're a man after my own heart, and I will say this. You and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I agree with you. There is one of the things about modern Star Trek, the Kelvin timeline, I mean, I liked Bones because he was a great, Carl Urban was great, but all of those people were assholes. I hated all of them. I especially hated Spock and Kirk. You know, Kirk, my favorite fictional character. Chris Pine portrayed him as he was written, but, I mean, give me a break. The Kirk-Spock dynamic, you've got an asshole who's captain, an arrogant asshole, and you've got a man who's one step away from having an emotional meltdown, who happens to be a Vulcan. Fuck those guys. And I mean, I like the actors, although I didn't like the way Zachary Quinto played Spock. He was directed to play Spock that way, but he seemed angry the whole time. He was always like one step away from an emotional outburst. I couldn't stand it. And the relationship that he had with Uhura, totally inappropriate. Spock would never have done that. You know, they're not going to just have an open relationship and flirt on the bridge or on missions. It's so there's so much wrong with the Kelvin movies. I know people, but Rob, they were fun. They were not fun for me. I did not find the experience of sitting watching Star Trek 09 in a theater fun. I found it to be anger-inducing. The whole movie was stupid, with a dumb fucking villain. A villain who's angry because a supernova destroyed his homeworld 100 years hence. The guy goes back in time, and rather than go to his homeworld and go, everyone, the Cobus star is going to explode, destroying our homeworld 100 years hence. Why don't we all figure out a way? I've got technology in the future, and I might fuck up the timeline, but I'm here to help. But no. Our villain is such an idiot. He ends up destroying Vulcan and getting mad at Earth. Why? You've been given a new lease on life, but rather than realize that, you get angry and you want to blow shit up. I'm like, you're the dumbest villain that's ever been in a Star Trek movie, much less a science fiction movie. You're an idiot. You're an idiot. You go back in the past and you ask somebody in the depths of space, do you know this person? Do you know the whereabouts of Admiral Spock? And you're expecting that would be me going to Bangladesh and asking them where is. Do you know where I stream with I know she's somewhere on Earth. Do you know where she is? But apparently, no. The villains in Star Trek '09 are like, have you seen this person? I mean, the dumbest is it's just brain fucking dead. Brain dead. But anyway, I could go off. I won't. I will not. K-Flake. K-Flake is here. K-Flake says, hello, Rob. This is my first time watching your show. Well, welcome, K-Flake. I discovered you on John Campy's show and have been watching Robservations with regularity for almost a year. I also catch the odd Midnight Metal. While I have your attention, I want to take a moment to thank you for being, in my opinion, one of the most thoughtful and heartwarming YouTubers I've come across. Oh, man. Come on now. This show has brought me to tears at times, but mostly it just makes me happy that the Post-Geek singularity has created something so wonderful in this little slice of the internet. Now on to my question. I've heard you discuss how successful one can get if they're in the right role in the television industry. Will television remain as lucrative a business as it has been in the streaming era? Thank you for your time, and please keep up the goof work. Sincerely, K-Flake. Well, K-Flake, thank you for that. And by the way, first of all, thank you for the kind words. No, I did not pay K-Flake to say that. That was very nice of you to say. But K-Flake asks a really interesting question, and I didn't realize you'd written this letter to apply to what we were talking about. No. One of the big things in the streaming world, it is going to completely curtail the kind of gigantic money you used to be able to make in television. So as I've said, if you are a creator of a TV show or you are one of the stars of a TV show that first starts out in America, like an ER or like Friends or something, it becomes a phenomenon, suddenly a successful television show. So what happens is, okay, when you're making a TV show, you basically deficit spend the first couple of years, meaning it's not profitable because it's really expensive to make a TV show. So what you hope is that you make a hit. And if you make a show that's a hit, by the time you get to seasons like, well, say 4 or 5, you're now you're totally in profitability because you got enough advertisers. But what really gets you profitable, what really makes you the big money, is if you have a successful TV show in America, then you go to France and Germany and Japan and wherever the hell you want to go, and you then can sell the show over and over again. You can license it to France. So France pays a licensing fee to get Friends. Now, how big is that licensing fee? Well, to give you an example, as we all know, in 2019, pre-pandemic, before Friends was going off Netflix, because Friends, even now, 5 years later, people still love Friends. Netflix paid $100 million to show Friends on their streaming service for one more year. It's already made. It's already on the streaming service. They get to now stream it for another year instead of turning it off. $100 million. Where does that money go? Well, it goes to the studio, but it goes to all the people that owns Friends, like as if the cast doesn't need enough money. Whatever their deals are, let's just assume that at this point they're profit sharing. You know, they're each getting, the Friends are getting 5% of what the show's worth. That means in 2019, all of our friends, Joey, Rachel, Phoebe, whatever, they all just, let's say they got 5%, right? They all got $5 million checks. $5 million checks. They didn't do shit. $5 million bucks. Here you go, because Netflix wants to license a show you made 25 years ago for one more year. Now imagine, apply that, not that much money, but apply it to international. So what a successful show can do is what you do is then you sell it like France has to pay some money. Like say France will give you $20 million or whatever it is. I don't know. Just for the sake of argument, $20 million bucks. Then you go to Germany. Germany will give you 30 based on, so there's 50 million. Then you go to Spain. Spanish, they never have as much money to spend on this kind of shit, so they might give you 5. So you're, 55 or whatever? And you sell it all around the world. Japan, they love Friends, so they might give you 75. And they do that every year. So you can see if you have a piece of a TV show, whether you're a creator, a producer, like an executive producer, an actor, but if you're top of the line, you can get very, very wealthy on a TV show. That will never happen in the streaming era because Netflix is worldwide. So when they come in, you don't get that kind of syndication payment. You're never going to get another payment. Netflix owns it. So what Netflix does is they come to you and they're like, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars to be in our show. And that's all you get. And you get that same amount of money for the 3 seasons we're going to make your show. And you're like, okay. There's no chance that you're going to get wealthy, like Aaron Spelling wealth, on selling in international rights to your shows or licensing them out. So it's a really good question. So that's another problem. It fundamentally, it's almost going to be impossible. Like Jason Blum says, even he's like, hey, man, you want to give me $400 million for The Exorcist, for 3 Exorcist movies that are all set in houses? Fine, I'll take that. Or Ryan Johnson's like, Knives Out, 2 Knives Out movies, and we all make we're getting $400 million that we split amongst the principals. Fuck yeah, dude. I'll take that shit. Because you're not going to be able to get rich making a Friends anymore. Because it'll only be one place, and then they own it. And if it becomes a cause celeb or a water cool show and everybody watches all over the world, they're all going to have HBO Max. So HBO Max gets the cheddar. So that's where we're at. Good letter, though. Good question. Let's see. What are you saying? I don't know. I have no idea. I'm going to find out. So are you. Let's see what you guys are saying. I'm going to go back as I look. Let's see if I missed anybody yesterday. Oh, that was the last one. Calvin Bowles right here. Oh, this is going to be disappointing for me to read. I feel bad. Calvin. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, Calvin Bowles says, Braxton, can't wait to see you at the Star Trek convention next week. Also, did the question he asked about Ed 209 ever occur to you in the past? It did not, but people have written about it. I must honestly say I never thought about it until he asked. It was true. See, sometimes out of the mouths of babes do we learn something about ourselves. It never occurred to me. For those of you who don't know, Calvin Bowles at 6 was watching RoboCop. Dad, let me have a talk with you. It doesn't matter. It's cool. You're a cool dad. So Calvin, young Master Calvin, an imagination connoisseur, newly minted, who's in his youth. He might be 7 now, but he was 6 a year ago. Calvin told his dad, asked his dad, how come the beginning of RoboCop, when Dick Jones demonstrates the Ed 209, they put live ammunition so the executive was killed. And I never thought about that until young Master Braxton asked. Good for you, young Master Braxton. Sends in a tip. I bet it was a diamond super chat sticker. I didn't see it, but thank you. You will see tomorrow on the Midnight Metal. Willow says, Willow, do you think that Chapek is solely or primarily to blame for the current turmoil at Disney? What advice will you be giving to Bob Iger during your next squash game together? Well, Bob and I, we've been playing squash for years, and I would say that what Bob already, he probably already knows this. He's going to go in and quietly solve this problem. That's what Bob's going to do. He's going to sweep back in. He's going to make sure Scarlett Johansson gets paid. She's going to sign an NDA, and it'll say Disney. They'll have a spokesperson. Disney will say we came to a settlement, and Scarlett Johansson will say, and I'm very satisfied. I very much appreciate Disney living up to their contractual obligations to me, and I look forward to a fruitful and ongoing relationship with them in the future. NJR 1984 sends in a super chat. Wow, thank you. I looked on a link about the Starfleet series on comingsoon.net. The thumbnail was me sitting on the lawn in my Starfleet Academy uniform when I was an extra in Star Trek 09. Finally, some justice for my character. Is that true? Hilarious. Boy, you know what? Again, a shockingly original idea for a Star Trek show. Starfleet Academy. How about instead of doing Starfleet Academy, you go back to Eric Jedrinson's script, Star Trek The Beginning, which has people graduating from Starfleet Academy, and make those the Odyssey trilogy. Go make that. Harv Bennett wanted to make a Starfleet Academy show all the way back during the classic movie days in the 80s. So, yeah. Slaw OTS, or OTS, sends in a super chat and says, time to rewrite the contracts in the streaming era. Yeah, it's true, but you're never going to get somebody to pony up that kind of cash, I guess, unless you're Jason Blum and want to make an Exorcist movie. Willie Woodward sends in a super chat. IYO. Why am I, I'm one of these old people. If you, what does IYO mean? How do I not know this acronym? Why don't I know it? Hang on. Let me see what it says. I'll find it. Diamond Platinum. IYO featuring Diamond Platinums. In your opinion. What? How can I not know that? IYO. Now I do. In your opinion, it's funny because I would assume that when you asked me a question, that was just, I thought it was something else. So, Willie Woodward says, in your opinion, when shopping a TV show, do you go to an agent or lawyer? Well, preferably you'd go to somebody that can make TV shows and put them on the air. No, I know what you're saying. An agent or a lawyer? Well, here's the thing. You don't go to either if you want to make a TV show. You need an agent and a lawyer if you want to get a TV show made, because presumably where you go to pitch your show, whether it's you got to go to a production company or a network or something, or go to Netflix directly. You should have an agent and a lawyer. To back you up. If you could only have one, though, have a lawyer, because it's harder to get an agent than it is to get a lawyer. Fine. A good entertainment lawyer is worth their weight in gold. Willie Woodward also goes on to say, why refuse to have someone as a partner when they could make more money that way? That's partly why YouTube got so successful. They make more dollars that way. Well, because people are greedy. I mean, I believe, look, I think that some of the most successful partnerships, Brian Grazer and Ron Howard, people who have, if you look at a lot of the most successful people in the entertainment business, actors have their team, their manager and their agents and their lawyers in place. They have a team of people that's helped them. A lot of filmmakers have their same collaborators. Thelma Schoonmaker and Martin Scorsese. Thelma Schoonmaker is his longtime editor. Like Steven Spielberg and Janusz Kaminski. The cinematographer. Michael Kahn is longtime editor. I agree with you. I think you need partners. You can't live in the wilderness. You need friends. Don't give up because you have friends. That's what Kate Bush said. Paulie from Latino Slant. More remix D2 with the chai. Wow, Rob. Wow, RMB. Okay then. By God. I would like to know what exactly. I think I'm losing some of what you're saying. What does that mean exactly? When I see D2, I just see Mighty Ducks 2. But yeah. Loyal Subject says, hi, Rob. You mentioned you were still tweaking Tango Shalom. Only the credits. How much lead time do developers need to have prints ready for theaters? Well, theoretically, you want to have them, weeks out, but so you can have all your DCPs and everything made. Is it being presented digitally or both? No. Tango Shalom was shot digitally, and it only exists digitally. So we could do a color separation and store it on celluloid, but I don't think that'll happen. So yeah, I mean, in the digital age, you can tweak up. Well, you can get it to theaters. You don't want to wait until the last minute. What I have to do now is put Tango into QC. It has to be QC quality control. It's got to be put up on scopes by an outside agency to tell me if we need to fix anything. So that's where we're at now. But yeah, I mean, a month. I want to keep it comfortable at a month. House Atreides says, hi, Rob. Will the industry go back to studio actors like in the 40s? In this case, a streaming service. Marvel brought back long-term contracts. Well, it really depends. I mean, I don't think anyone's necessarily ever going to be loyal to a specific studio anymore unless the deals are lucrative. Maybe. I mean, maybe that could happen, but I think people want to keep their options open, because really it's about, I think the business has changed, that people want to work with collaborators. Like, I think actors want to work with good directors, and good directors, there's new good directors every day. So nobody wants to be tied down by only working for a certain entity. The thing about the Marvel universe is it's unique in the sense that they wanted characters to be able to, by its very design, appear in movies over a long period of time, and it really worked out well. So I don't know if we're ever going to go back to the studio system, but that's kind of an interesting idea. But I do think it would be very limiting, especially as a filmmaker like myself. If I want to go hire an actor that's under contract with Netflix and I'm not making a Netflix movie, that would bum me out. Darth Plato, the resident Burnettwork historian, says, to expand on the age of Homer, there wasn't a concept of modern virtue in those days. A hero was someone that performed a great deed, regardless of death, destruction, or mayhem. A hero was like a modern athlete. Disregard custom. That was flawed. That's interesting. I did not know that. Jason S. says, Rob, you're mistaken. The current federal administration, including the California government, has solved the homelessness problem once and for all by forcing landlords to house people for free and can't kick them out for failure to pay rent. Fascism works. Well, Jason S., there's still a hell of a lot of homeless people in California. Obviously, I understand you're talking about the eviction, the moratorium on evictions. And you know what? You're not wrong, but I don't think it's just in California. You know, it's all around. I will say this. The man who owns this house that we live in was very nice during the pandemic. He reduced our rent, and then he allowed our rent to be split into 2 payments, which was fantastic of him. So I've never met him, but kudos to you, sir, because you that was something we didn't even ask for, but thank you. But yes, Jason, look, again, I don't think the roots of homelessness is all wrapped up only in housing. But yeah, I look, do I think that there should be an eviction moratorium? Well, I think it needs to be a little bit more nuanced. But yeah, I don't think that's fascism. I think that's the way to stop the country from falling apart. Look, there needs to be certain measures taken during a pandemic. You can't, when millions and millions of people are suddenly out of work, what are you going to do? Let us spiral down into a Great Depression? We can't do that. Our man Jeremiah Bailey says Superman takes skill and patience and reverence for comics. Execs have none of that. Midnighter 1.5 tonight. Check me out. Well, Jeremiah, all right then. Yes, Jeremiah asked if he could carry on the Midnighter, and I suggested he can. I'm still trying to figure out how he could do it on this channel, but we'll see how it goes. I guess it'll be good to see how you do, sir. I'll be watching. Jeff Yerke, our man Jeff Yerke, and of course Mrs. Yerke. Rob, nothing much to report. Mrs. Y and I finished ITV's Sharps Rifles. A lot of people wrote in about that, by the way, when you mentioned it last time, with Sean Bean, and we loved it. Yes, the fight scenes were lame, but it was 1995 TV budgets. Mr. Bean is the man. Love to all. Live long and prosper. The Yerk Man. Well, thank you, Yerk Man. It's good to see you're feeling well, and please give your wife a kiss for me and whisper something dirty and tell her that's what you want to do to her tonight. Tell her I told you to do that. Stub McShave sends in a tip and says, I rewatched The Dead Poets Society. It seems to get more poignant the older I get. I found the scene where they talk about avoiding conformity especially interesting in today's storytelling climate. Look, I agree. I mean, the great films, the great stories continue to resonate long after they're made. I think you're absolutely right about that. And indeed, I appreciate that, Stubble. I love Good Will Hunting. I think it's a great movie, and it's lost none of its power. I can't watch it, though. It always makes me sad. I mean, I can watch it, but I always get sad about Robin Williams. Kevin sends in a super chat and says, speaking of multi-million-dollar deals, South Park creators Trey Parker and Matt Stone signed a $900 million Viacom deal. 14 movies are planned for Paramount Plus. Do you know that I have seen an episode of South Park that no one else has ever seen except a very few handful of people? So as many people know, Trey Parker and Matt Stone made a greeting card. The South Park characters first appeared in The Spirit of Christmas, and it was basically a little greeting card, a video that was sent out. George Clooney saw it, and he sent it out to everybody in Hollywood. And that's basically how Trey Parker and Matt Stone were discovered. I mean, obviously they made Orgasmo and they made other movies, but around that time, I want to say this is the what days were it? Mid-90s. I don't remember exactly when. So I was working with George Clooney's assistant, Amy Cohen, a delightful woman, and she and I were making a birthday video for George Clooney's birthday. One of the most star-studded things I've ever seen, and the only time Cameron Diaz ever appeared topless in anything was in our video, which we shot at Jerry's Deli on 3rd. That's not there anymore. But Trey Parker and Matt Stone made a South Park video that opened that birthday video. And it was hilarious where they all call George Clooney a pig fucker. It's in the video, and it opens the video. And it was a birthday video, big star-studded. I mean, if I gave you the roster of talent that was in our George Clooney birthday video, you would not believe it. Between Hollywood heavy hitters and A-list stars, it was insane. I don't have a copy of it. There's one copy of that, and it was Amy Cohen took it. She was working for her boss and showed it. I didn't even go to the birthday party where it was shown, but I shot a lot of it and cut it together. But it does have a piece of, maybe they put that on something. I don't know. Maybe they have. I don't know if they have, but that was done. And as far as I know, that was the only time anyone had ever seen it. Trey Parker and Matt Stone are absolutely worth that much money. And look what they've done. Look at South Park. I can only imagine. Now, that kind of a deal, that's interesting because that's the kind of talent deal. They're locking them up. I'm sure it's exclusive for that much money, but they already know what they're getting. That is not show friends. That is show business. And God bless those two. They used to co-throw a party, a Halloween party with Amy Cohen. And I used to go to those every year. They were phenomenal. One of my favorite Hollywood party traditions every year was Amy Cohen's Halloween parties. And if you were there, you know what I mean. Anyway, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, Robservations episode number 731 is coming to an end. And I want to say thank you to everybody that generously supports the channel through tips and super chats. Thank you for those who write letters. If you want to write me a letter, it's free of charge. You can go to the Burnettwork.net website and write me a letter. I want to say thank you to my moderating staff. Justin Toner is here. Let's see who else is here. Bunyan Snipe is here, all the way from the UK. I don't know if Louise Expero is here. I'm just seeing to Bunyan and Justin, but okay, that's good. I want to thank you guys for being the moderators that you are. And one of the things that makes this channel special is those blue wrenches out there keeping all of you honest. And on that note, I will say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I would say to all of you, have a better day.